The Eye on the Central Coast takes you all over the Central Coast, including this beautiful beach in Morro Bay. Where do you see it? Channel 7, that's where do you see it. When do you see it? 7 to 9 a.m. early in the morning. 1 to 2 p.m. in the middle of the day. 6 to 7 p.m. That's the prime time. And 11 to 12 p.m. The Eye on the Central Coast. Please watch it. Those crabby crabs, and I'm a crabby old man as well, are Dungeness crab. Live and fresh. Giovanni Restaurant, fresh fish, and I do mean fresh fish. These beautiful crab go right over into a crab pot that's right behind me, and then you can take your crab home fresh, hot, and ready to eat. Giovanni's is a fabulous place to come here in Morro Bay. Let's go meet the man himself. Introduce yourself.
My name is Giovanni from Giovanni's Fish Market in Morro Bay, located on the Embarcadero.
About midway, right?
Yeah, right across from Wavelengths at the S in the road.
Now you actually have 3 separate businesses here.
Actually, 2 separate businesses. We have a fuel and ice dock and an unloading facility for the boats, and then we have the retail fish market and galley.
Now you've been in business how long?
We've been here for more than 25 years, family owned and operated.
So you're second generation.
Yep, second generation. My dad was Mike DeGaramore, and he came here in the 60s. He was a commercial abalone diver for 17 years, and then started opening fish markets.
How do you separate, and I've been a customer of your store for many years, so I have a sense of it, but I'd like, from your perspective, you have customers who come in and buy fresh fish, and you have customers who stand in line or who want to come in and buy over the counter. How do you separate the two things?
Well, we separate it, first of all, by having 2 cash registers and 2 separate meeting places for those customers to go. The majority of the customers that want fresh fish are going to go inside of the case, and they're going to select what they want, make their purchase, and walk out. Whereas we have a walk-up window for the cooked food, where people are going to generally look at the menu on the outside, order there, and then wait for their order to come up. And there was a time when those 2 were kind of commingled together, and we've really tried to separate them out as separate businesses now. So we have separate cash registers, and like we talked about, the employees now, the ones that are in the kitchen are pretty much in the kitchen, the ones that are in the market are pretty much in the market. And it's changing, and we're branching off into 2 very separate but also together businesses.
Now, we talked about some of the things that maybe you would have done differently if you had the opportunity to do it again. Anything come to mind?
There's a lot of things now that I can look back in hindsight and say, yeah, we should have maybe invested more in that. But you didn't know at the time where the fishing industry was going.
Right.
There was a period, 5 to 6 years ago when we put a lot of money into this dock. My father put a lot of money into rebuilding this dock, and it's panned out now as a dining area. But with the cost of what it cost, maybe we could have done it a little bit differently. The money has definitely shifted from the fishing industry to the tourism industry. So putting money into the fishing industry didn't make sense, and we started to realize that about almost 10 years ago. We could see which way it was going, and it just became exponentially apparent through the years that it didn't make sense to invest in there. So now, where my investment's going is into a kitchen where people come here and they decide this is really what they like, and I believe that's because we have a really good product, we serve a really good portion, and everything on our menu is under $10. So we're really appealing to a class of people that want to come here with their family and have an affordable, really good meal with great ambiance. And I think that's just proven to be a really popular concept, and there's a resounding yes from the people that's what they want. And it's not just the tourists, but also the locals.
The fishing industry part of it, is that something to do with overfishing? Is it over management? In your view, where does this fit?
In my view, it's definitely over management. The industry's had strict quota guidelines for more than a decade, almost 2 decades now, and the fishermen have been following a real strict set of rules. The problem is that there isn't good data for the fishing game to assess it, and when they don't have data, what they do is they just impose stricter and stricter impositions on the fishermen because they just don't know what's out there. So they take this approach of let's go with the most and see what happens, because we don't know. And unfortunately, you know, between that and, you know, the Nature Conservancy with the buyback programs and, you know, people wanting to set up marine preserves here, it's taking chunks and chunks and chunks away from the pie, and what we have left is a very small piece of pie for the ones that are left, and we see that number dwindling too. The number of fishermen has definitely decreased.
We're in Morro Bay and we're talking to a commercial fisherman, and the commercial fishing business is struggling here along the Central Coast. So we thought we'd stop by and get a fisherman's perspective on it. Introduce yourself, sir.
Well, my name's Ed Ewing and I'm a local commercial fisherman. I've also run charter boats and I've been here since 1968. Yeah, the government's put a lot of restrictions on the rockfish, both on hook and line and gill netting and trawling. And one of the problems is the northern vessels up in Oregon, Washington, Northern California have caught a lot of fish, and they thought that the fish were depleted enough where they should put restrictions on them. We have a lot of fish here, and what we need is more federal data and to prove that there is a lot of fish here.
Now, how does Oregon and Washington affect fishing in Morro Bay or Santa Barbara?
Well, it's controlled by the Pacific Fisheries Management Council and the National Marine Fisheries. And they're the government federal entity that controls all fishing outside of 3 miles. And the lobbyists and the ground fish advisory panels and a lot of the people that are on that council are influenced by the northern people that have the most money as far as the industry is concerned. They've controlled the prices, they've controlled the regulations. And so they can actually fill a quota up there and actually shut the whole coast down, shut us down, because of things that they've done there.
So what are you trying to do about it?
Well, we'd like to get a community quota here. And I'm not sure all the fishermen agree with me, but we need to have the association to have a meeting and get this Nature Conservancy, who just bought out 6 of the draggers that help support this place. And now we have no marine store or fuel dock, or we're short on ice and everything else because we don't have the money to support the infrastructure. So what we're trying to do is get a community quota so that the local guys are more responsible for what they catch, that we can fish them when we need to fish them, have individual fishermen's quotas for this area, so that whatever they do up north doesn't necessarily affect us here, and we wouldn't affect them up there, and we could price structure our fish better too.
Okay, now you've lost your store.
Well, the marine store quit.
You gave it up, right? And from what I understand, the fuel dock and the ice over here is actually running at a loss.
Oh yeah.
So that's obviously affecting your business.
Oh sure.
Now you told me a little bit about how much it costs to operate this boat. Would you let the folks know how much it costs to operate, so that they understand why the cost of fish is what it is?
Well, if this boat was owned privately right now and fished like me, it would cost $20,000 a year for insurance, probably $10,000 a year for maintenance if you averaged it out from the engine rebuilds and haul outs, whatnot.
Sure.
And it cost at almost $3 a gallon for fuel, $2.60 to $3 a gallon for fuel. It costs $2,000 a day just for fuel. And so when you go out, you got about a $2,500 bill before you go out, for fuel and ice, and then there's your crew, and then there's upkeep with the webbing and everything else. So another thing we're doing with this vessel is trying to do an economic study to show how much we have to catch to survive here and what prices we have to get for the fish and what it costs us to go catch them.
One of the other things I like to discuss, and I didn't bring it up earlier, but I will now because you and I actually touched on it a little bit, and that's the price of fish. Do you see any change coming? Do you see it going higher? Where do you see the future?
It's hard to say, because when we talked about the cutbacks on fishing, I mean, obviously it's supply and demand 101. Yeah. Here we've got the supply going down. We've got demand for a lean, healthy protein. You know, Americans are wanting to eat healthier, especially on the Central Coast. So here we've got, you know, the premium product. It's in high demand and short supply, which means higher prices. And I think we're going to have to see a change somewhere. At some point, it's going to have to level off, because I believe we're seeing price resistance at this point. We're starting to see our sales, you know, start to level off and even drop in some cases, because, you know, we're looking at some things in the case that can reach, you know, $15 a pound for like halibut or something like that. Whereas years ago, there was nothing in the case higher than $10 a pound. You'd see snapper at $3 and petrale at $6. Today, snapper's at $6 and petrale's at $10. So, and with halibut, like we said, at 15. So we're starting to see some price resistance. What we're doing to battle that is try and bring in some more value-minded products, things like tilapia that are readily available, that are good product at a reasonable price, and give people the option. We're never going to stop carrying the higher-end, you know, salmon, halibut, because there's a definite demand for that. But some people have a budget, and we have to address all people and have something for everybody and have really good quality product.
The numbers across the board are decreasing. More and more you're depending upon tourism, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've seen our business change, and we've had to adapt, and business is always changing, and for us, the primary source of our business was the fishing industry and unloading. Like I said, we would unload nearly 500,000 pounds a month in our heyday. We were processing tons and tons of fish, sending it all the way to Japan. And for my part of the business now, it's just that's not there anymore. So I've had to really make a living out of the fish market, which does take pretty good care of us, but we're constantly having to change, and that's why we're having to focus on the cooked food now and really tapping into the tourists as our revenue.
Economic study that you're trying to do hasn't been done in the Morro Bay area.
Well, there's been some studies done, but what we're going to try to do here is get the marketing, and the city got a grant for this to try to get the marketing going so we can advertise Morro Bay local seafood, try to get a better price for the fish, and try to get a sustainable fishery going, not only for a few draggers that are going to be working out here, hopefully will work out of here, plus trying to get the Nature Conservancy to agree to put some of that quota that from the boats they bought over to trap guys, and we need to have an association meeting to get this taken care of. But right now, I'm most concerned in trying to get a sustainable trawl fishery going, because that was the bread and butter of our area. There's probably about 60 to 70 fishermen, counting the nearshore guys and the salmon boats and the albacore boats. Not all of them are full-time.
If there's a cooperative effort between all of the fishermen, and you can agree on it and vote on it and bring it about to happen, is it viable to have a fisherman actually make a living?
Yes, sure. There's guys making a living right now. But it's tough. It's not easy. They got to watch their P's and Q's.
Let's talk just a little bit about the fishing industry in Morro Bay to begin with. What kind of a struggle is it for you and for the other fishermen here?
It's constantly a struggle that changes from day to day, it seems like, with all the state and federal regulation, fishing closures and quota management going on. It's really become a difficult situation for the fishermen to make a living with all the closures that are going on.
So you couldn't maintain your business here based upon the profit margin from your fishing?
That's correct. In our heyday, we would unload nearly 500,000 pounds a month of fish across our dock. Along with that would be fuel and ice sales to the fishing boats. By today's numbers, we're down about 90%. So we're unloading very little fish, selling very little fuel and very little ice.
The fishermen are environmentalists in a sense.
They are. We have a lot of salmon fishermen that go to bat at Sacramento, and also in the federal government trying to save some of the rivers and actually restore some of the spawning grounds. They help do that up north, and they really are. There's aspects of the industry that if you run your gear wrong, you can do some damage. But if you're careful with what you do and you use the right type of gear, there's nothing wrong. And the biggest thing we need is marketing too. We need to we got to stop killing resources cheap. I mean, the average consumer doesn't think fish is cheap anymore. But if you really think about the price a commercial fisherman gets by the time it gets to the end user, there's a lot of hands in between there.
Oh, I bet.
So that's one of the problems there. And without the volume, it becomes more expensive and more expensive. And pretty soon, if they shut a lot of these local fisheries down, you'll be getting fish from elsewhere, overseas. So, you can't guarantee how good it's going to be. The fishermen are going to have to change some of the way they do business with the government. Yeah. Plus, it's hard to take somebody that pushes a pencil up there, that's a bureaucrat, that then they have these advisory teams that have scientists and fishermen on them up there. When I say up there, I'm talking about mostly Northern California, Oregon, Washington. That's where the big boys play at. They don't even look at us now. They've controlled the prices for years. They've controlled the regulations for years, and we're just getting sick of it down here.
And on the other side of it, to give both sides of the picture, it's kind of hard to change the habits of an old fisherman who's been doing it one way for a very long time, and all of a sudden he sees all these things happening, and he can't be too happy about it. He's got to be.
Well, a lot of them aren't, but a lot of them gets frustrated because they know that some things don't need to be the way they are, but they can't get the government to change their ways they do business. You know, and there's going to be a whole bunch of opposition to this community quota business from up there. They're going to hate us for it, for trying to do it. I'll guarantee you that. And they're already grumbling about it. They don't like the idea of it. The federal government has control outside 3 miles, and it'd be like taking some of their control away, but we're really not.
But it seems
They're
like
still
it
going to be
makes
the ones.
sense.
They're still going to be the ones. It does make sense. They're still going to be the ones that designate how much we can catch.
Right.
They're still going to have scientists looking at it. They're still going to have research guys looking to see how much fish is here. So why not have a community quota where the guys can have so much a year they know they can go fish that particular quota, and when the weather's nice, they can sell the fish when the price is up. They can do what they need to do, you know, rather than all this piecemeal stuff coming from Washington. You know, and that happens a lot. It's a sick way of doing business is what they're doing right now.
So you had to sign a contract with the Nature Conservancy?
Well, I'm waiting for a contract, an operating agreement. I had a 3-hour discussion with them about trawling and how their perceptions were messed up. And they are messed up. I mean, the thing is,
Right.
I can prove, and I'm going to prove it. Nature Conservancy bought 6 trawlers.
Why?
They don't like draggers. They have this perception that draggers are bad, that they tear the bottom up, that they do this and that. Well, the point is that if you have a big factory trawler and big reel, you're rumbling over the rocks, you can do some damage. But if you use a small net with a small foot rope and you watch your bycatch and you go in certain areas and you stay away from the rocks, there's nothing wrong. There's no other way to catch sole, an abundance of sole. You can catch a few hook and line and a few traps, but you cannot catch sole in any amount of abundance at all where you can make a living unless you trawl for them. That's it. And that's just the way it is.
When you go out for 3 days at a time approximately, usually.
Yeah. 3-day trips, and if we're lucky, we'll get, you know, 20, 25,000 pounds of fish.
How many crew?
Well, this boat, we're just taking him, and they're going to make me take an observer along from the federal government or from an